All right. So we're here. We're doing Life Psych Podcast, Baby Bump Edition, episode 2, which is always exciting to get to talk with you about this topic and just engage with you in this way.
Yeah. I will say, as maybe a teaser for the conversation to come, I did not anticipate that we would be having this particular episode this early or even potentially at all.
Same. My expectation was episode 2. I was going to reveal to you my pregnancy and in some like cute way. And then, but I think that goes to show just how much this topic is necessary for women out there, because you feel really excited, like you're planning things, and then life comes and kind of just takes a different course and you have to figure out how to go with it.
Yeah, it's unpredictable.
For sure.
Do you want to just give any listeners or watchers like a overview of what we're talking about today, about what's been happening for you, and before we get into like a deeper level conversation about it?
Sure. Yeah. So we started this podcast, Stephanie and I, with the intention of following my journey as a mental health counselor through pregnancy, right? Through what pre-pregnancy looks like, what pregnancy looks like, and then hopefully with everything that goes well, post-pregnancy. But what we're talking about today is something that happens for so many women, is miscarriage. And so the podcast episodes took a little detour because I think in my mind schedule of what the podcast schedule would look like, or the episode schedule would look like, it was talking about what the podcast introduction, or talking about the introduction of the podcast, getting a little bit into what prenatal care looks like, and kind of progressing in that way. But life has different plans sometimes. And so I quickly, on the positive side, was quickly able to get pregnant, but on the not so positive side, had a miscarriage. And so talking about that today out in the open, I think is something that is the point of what this podcast is meant for, right? So as it may feel slightly uncomfortable, because I think I said in our first episode, I'm not a huge social media sharer. That's not usually my go-to. So while it might feel slightly uncomfortable to do that, that was the goal of this for me, was to be able to share experiences through a mental health lens of kind of like an everyday down to earth view of what pregnancy looks like. And sometimes with pregnancy comes loss. And so that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. And I just want to say, I really admire and appreciate your willingness to talk about this in this kind of a forum. I mean, I know that you and I could talk about this privately, and I know that that's hopefully what this conversation today will feel like, is it's just us. And just because we're recording it doesn't change the fact that it's just us having a conversation. But I think that there's such a value in sharing with others what this experience was like for you, or anyone who's willing to share about what this experience was like for them if they've gone through it, because it is really common. And as clinicians, you and I both know that when people do have miscarriages, and now you know your own personal experience with it, it's really painful. And I think what I see with my clients in particular is a lot of shame and a lot of secrecy, I guess, or like not necessarily secrecy per se, but like this is really hard and painful, and I feel ashamed, and I don't want to talk about it, and nobody else talks about it. And it can be very isolating. I think that's what I'm getting at. So I appreciate your willingness to bring your personal experience with this into a forum where other people can hear it and know that they're not alone, and know that even though the loss is painful, that it's possible to like process what has happened and keep moving forward in the journey, So yeah, just a moment to appreciate you before we really get into it.
Well, thank you for saying that. I think one of the biggest motivating factors for me is how we started this journey with this podcast, was to be able to hopefully build a village around pregnancy, around motherhood, around womanhood in general, for women out there. And I think you use the word isolating, and people do. I've heard that in my therapy sessions before with clients who unfortunately have had miscarriages. It does feel, it can feel very isolating, yet it's such a common experience. So one of the best ways to remove that isolation is communicating, is connecting. And so we're doing that today between you and I. And yes, of course, I feel comfortable talking to you in general.
Yeah. And I think, like, for me as the person in the sort of interviewer role in this conversation, often when I'm talking with people in my personal life versus when I'm speaking with my clients, I have a different approach to the kinds of questions that I ask. Like, I feel like with people in my personal life, I'm much more likely to sit back and not ask questions that I might be willing to ask in session. And my reason for that is because in session with clients, I feel like, okay, you're here, you're in therapy, you're paying me for service. It is my job to help you process, to help you dig deeper, and to shine light on things that are hard to talk about. Sometimes people need a little bit of guidance, bringing the stuff that they don't have the light on into the light to be able to talk more about. And with people in my personal life, I feel like I don't want to take on the therapist role because I don't want to put people in an uncomfortable position. I'm not their therapist, but I think for the sake of this conversation, just to be transparent, I am, and we talked about this before we started recording, I am going to try to step into maybe a little bit more of the therapist role than I normally would with you, just because I think, like, this is what we're trying to do here. We're trying to invite more detail about the experience so that you have a chance to talk about it, so people who are listening have a chance to learn about it, so I have a chance to learn about it from you. And you've pretty much said, like, hey, I'm comfortable talking about this at this point in my journey, and I want to share about it. And so I'll still ask my questions respectfully. Like, I'll still maybe, depending on how the conversation unfolds, say things like, hey, is it okay for me to ask about this? Or like, would you be willing to talk more about that? And if you don't want to, that's fine. But those might not be questions I would ask if we like went out to dinner.
Right. Yeah. Those deeper conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's funny. And really well said. But I do think that, yes, for the purposes of this kind of setting, what our goal is with this, I think it's helpful for folks out there to see maybe even what that looks like. What does therapy look like? Some people I have come into my practice, they've never been to therapy before, so understanding, well, I'm going through a loss right now. People say therapy can be helpful. I have no idea what therapy looks like. Well, this is what it looks like, right? This is kind of what it looks like. And understanding that maybe will get people a little bit more comfortable with the idea of like, well, maybe this is something that can help me. It's not as scary as it feels at first.
Yeah. And what you just said reminded me, I also want to say, a difference between therapy and what we're doing today is that, in therapy, my agenda is always about helping the other person to the best of my ability. And one of the things that is in my code of ethics that I am bound to as a therapist is basically that, like, I don't just ask questions for my own personal curiosity, right? Like, I'm asking questions from a place of, do I believe that asking this question is going to be helpful? Is it going to help the person I'm speaking with explore something they haven't thought about before, or bring something that they feel some shame about into the light so that they can release it to some degree, whatever. But in this conversation, I am going to allow myself to lean into just like, hey, I'm curious to know more. Not necessarily because I think it would benefit you to share about that, but because that's something I don't know about and I'd like to learn, which is not something that I would do in therapy. So if someone's listening to this and they're using this as a sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Like an entryway into, hey, I've never been to therapy before. What might it look like? Just so that you know, if you've never been to therapy before, your therapist is not like, that's really cool. Like, tell me about that because I want to know. The therapist is thinking about that, about things for your sake.
That's really great distinction. Really well said again, Steph. I think what you said though is that you're not going to be, you might be curious and lean into that curiosity, not because you think it's for my benefit, which is completely fine by me in this circumstance, but it may be for other people's benefit, for our viewers' benefit. And that's what we're doing here. So, but yeah, really, really great distinction. And maybe that's a topic in and of itself one day. What does therapy look like? I've just experienced a loss, or I'm experiencing some really high level anxiety that I never had before. What can you expect out of a therapy session? And what approaches are out there for therapy?
Yeah. Cool. So should we get into it?
We shall. Let's get into it.
Okay. So I'm thinking, as a starting point, I would like to kind of invite you, Maria, to just kind of tell the story of discovering you were pregnant, what that was like, through up to the point of realizing that the miscarriage was happening. And so I'll just kind of give you some space to tell the story, and then maybe we can explore deeper from there. Does that sound okay?
That sounds great. Yeah. And at any point, feel free to pause me if there's something that you're not understanding or that you'd like to learn more about and go a little deeper. Okay, let me see. Where do I begin?
When did you start trying? Like consciously trying to get pregnant?
Yes. So of course, there's always a chance with sexual activity that you can get pregnant, right? But there's a difference between just kind of seeing how it goes and also really being mindful and intentional about timing, so that you could get pregnant.
Right. And what's funny, I don't want to interrupt. Sorry. I know a lot of people who, whose journey looks like, well, let's stop using contraception and just like let the universe decide for a certain duration of time. And then they kind of launch into like, okay, the universe has had its chance. Like, we're not using contraception anymore. Like, let's really like use the calendar.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I'm thinking about as I'm listening.
Yeah, no, I've always used a calendar, not always, but for some time I've used a calendar to track my cycle, because I think that there's value in knowing what goes on for me. And actually, Steph, your recommendation a while ago using the Clue app was a really great recommendation for me, because it kind of gives you this superpower as a woman. And I think that's how you described it to me, to know during what time of your cycle, what's going on in your body. Are you having brain fog? Do you know why you're having brain fog? Are you more hungry? Are you less hungry, more irritable? Do you feel really productive today? Like you could take on the world, or maybe you shouldn't schedule something for this time of the month, because you know in advance that that's usually the time of your cycle where your energy and motivation takes a dip. So all that to say, I've been tracking my cycle for some time, but not for the purposes of pregnancy. So I would say that I and my partner, my husband, we started being intentional about paying attention solely to my ovulation, according to the prediction on these calendars. So not entirely sure at that point how accurate that prediction was, but we were going with it, going with certain signs of my body, being more cognizant of, okay, what am I feeling today? It says that I should be ovulating soon. So what does that feel like for me? And was there consistency throughout a few months? I probably started doing that sometime in the summer, this past summer. And we're in February now. So sometime this past summer up until now, I've been really getting to know what ovulation feels like. And then I'd say we really were very intentional about trying August and September and October. And one thing that I changed from 1 month of not getting pregnant to the next month of getting pregnant was getting these ovulation test kits, which some people swear by. Some people don't think they provide that much information because it's really an ovulation prediction. It's another prediction. It's not a definitive answer. But I wanted more information about my body. So I bought these kits. I wanted to see if the timing of the calendar matched the ovulation prediction of these test strips, which they basically did. But it gets a little bit more accurate, like, well, within 12 to 36 hours from now, you should be ovulating. And so you kind of have a really nice tight window of what the prediction is of what your fertile window is. And yeah, so after having those kits for 1 month, I got pregnant. So as soon as I knew exactly when ovulation was happening, I was able to get pregnant. And that is a blessing in and of itself, right? To have, to know that my body can do that, right? Up until that point in my life, I had never had any unplanned pregnancies that I know of. And so it was a really nice, reassuring feeling to know, oh, my body can conceive this pregnancy. So I found out right when I missed my period in November, and it was a very light line on the pregnancy test, but that was the first time I ever saw any line on a pregnancy test. So I was pretty certain that it was positive. It was a very exciting, really fun moment for my husband and I to share together. And then since I found out pretty early on, I called my doctor and I said, I see a practice of midwives. And so I called my midwives and I said, this is the test. I just received a positive pregnancy test. And they said, okay, the earliest you could come in to see your sonogram, to see a sonogram would be 8 weeks. I said, all right, great. So we made an appointment for 8 weeks. And
Wait, can I ask you, can I jump in with a question? Whatever your most recent appointment was up to that point, had you talked with them at all about the process of trying?
I went to my annual with them. And during my annual exam, they asked where I was at, if at all, with my thoughts about getting pregnant. And I told them that we would be trying soon. I had just taken out my IUD, which was my choice of birth control. So I had told them this is no longer, inside of me. So I'm able to get pregnant at this point. But we're not actively trying. During my annual, I was not actively trying. So they knew that was potentially coming.
Right. Just curious. Yeah.
Yeah. And at that appointment, then they give you kind of like tips and tricks of those ovulation test kits could be helpful, but not always helpful, right? They kind of taper your expectations or temper your expectations. So actually one thing probably to note on there, one thing to note about that appointment that I actually found interesting was the midwife was very reassuring by saying that there was a certain percentage chance. I don't remember the percentage at this point, and I can look it up and get more specific with this, but up until a year of trying is a very normal amount of time to try and not necessarily have a pregnancy, right? You can try from 0 to 12 months and at the 12th month get pregnant, and that's still considered very normal. I think growing up, when we're really young, we think about, oh my goodness, I can't have sex because then I will get pregnant. Or if I have sex, I'm going to get pregnant. It's like a definite in your head. And then of course, as our bodies age, I'm in my 30s, that's not necessarily the case. Even as a young, 20 something, if I were trying to get pregnant, it wouldn't necessarily happen right away. And that's because of this fertile window that I was describing earlier, that there is only a certain amount of time, a very short amount of time that they don't describe in health class in 6th grade, that the egg that releases from your ovary is viable. And it's about 24 hours, sometimes less than that the egg is even viable to be, I guess, what is the word I'm looking for? To be met with the sperm and to become fertile or fertilized. And so it's not as simple as it's simple, but it's not that simple.
Yeah, it is funny. I think as I've aged, I've had a lot of conversations with friends and people in my personal life, and some clients too, about like, yeah, like when you're younger, if you're sexually active when you're younger and you're not in a stable relationship, or you're not ready or trying to have a baby, you know, the idea of having a pregnancy scare, things like, oh, I took my birth control pill late, or, oh, you know, I took this risk, whatever that, or something went wrong, or, you know, the sort of the fear of, what if I get pregnant? What if I'm, you know, I'm not ready. And to then sort of fast forward however many years and realize, oh my God, this is actually like so hard to just be trying all this. If I had known, you know, years ago that it was going to be this hard, maybe I would have freaked out so much about this, that, or the other thing. But I mean, I also have a friend who had like her tubes tied and then got pregnant. So it's just like crazy. Like we think we can predict. We can't predict. We can make some educated guesses, but we can't know with certainty how difficult or how easy it's going to be. But yeah, very different. The way things go is so different often than what we may have been taught in health class in sixth grade.
Without a doubt. And I mean, of course, I think health class has its purpose. It's, you know, to teach safe sex and safe sex with certain partners that, you know, and so we're being healthy with our bodies and all of that. But yeah, it's definitely not as simple as they, you know, made it out to be when we were 12 years old.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, it's not so much a matter of like, do these methods work, not work? It's more like our perception of how reliable different things are and how likely certain outcomes are, like what we think will happen versus how it actually goes. But anyway, keep going.
Yeah. No, these are all really great points. And I feel like could be whole episodes in and of themselves. Like expectations about pregnancy is a huge, huge topic that I talk to a lot of women about in my practice. Talk to a lot of women in my personal life about expectations about pregnancy and family planning. And I think what you said is, it couldn't be truer. We have these predictions, but not really predictions. They're more educated guesses, because we take all the information that we can, or that we feel comfortable getting, and we make educated guesses with them. But that's all they really are. They're educated guesses. And from there, our bodies really need to just do what they're going to do. And we have to trust our bodies. And that's a whole topic again, in and of itself. I think though, going through the process of wanting to get pregnant, getting pregnant, having a miscarriage, I've always been pretty in tune with my body, but it's become even more heightened since then. And I think that if I can impart one piece of wisdom for women who are going through the process of wanting to get pregnant, getting pregnant, if they're going through a loss of pregnancy, getting really familiar with your body, and being gentle with it and thanking it for doing whatever process it's doing, even if it's not a process that you expected or that you like in particular, but being grateful that it's doing what it was meant to do in some capacity, and knowing what that feels like physically. Because the more that we can get in tune with our bodies, that's more information to help us make our educated predictions about.
Yeah, that's great. You know, and it's so funny, as you're talking, I'm finding myself having spin-offs in my head, like, ooh, we should do an episode about this. Ooh, we should do an episode about this. What just came into my head as you were talking about getting in tune with one's own body is like, I've had a lot of conversations generally just regarding pregnancy, but also not anything to do with pregnancy, with regard to tuning into the body to figure out what's going on with oneself emotionally, things like that. But I think especially for women, but not only for women, one of the things that makes getting in touch with the body so challenging is the pervasiveness of diet culture, and talking about like diet culture, fat phobia, like all of the kind of preconceived ideas we have about our body. Can we control our body? Is our body doing what we want it to, relative to like the idea? And it comes back to control, right? Like, can I control my body? Can I make my body do what I want it to? That would be, I mean, I have to just cut myself off, because that I could talk for hours about that too. And I think that's a different episode, but yeah.
I think it's an episode we should very highly consider doing, though, because there's a whole cult. How could you expect a human to get in touch with their own body and be present with their own body if, one, they're distracted all the time with incoming stimuli from social media, from society, from TV, whatever it may be, from other people's judgment. And how could you expect to be comfortable to sit with yourself if you're not even comfortable with what you're looking at in the mirror because of all of this incoming stimuli telling you what you should be comfortable with? We live in a very disconnected world, disconnected culture. And so to say, oh, we should get aligned and just get really connected with our mind and our body, it's really nice to say, but it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of intentional effort, which is something that I've spent many years doing for myself because I know how beneficial it can be, but that doesn't mean it's an easy road to get there. And there are so many times where I don't want to be in my own body because it's super uncomfortable. Just because we're living an aligned life doesn't mean we always like how it feels.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true.
So we're getting.
So it's November.
Yeah.
You use the ovulation kit. It was very helpful. You got pregnant.
Yes, I got pregnant.
Take me on the journey from there.
Yes. So my husband and I decided, before telling any of our family, we wanted to feel comfortable knowing that the pregnancy was actually viable. So we would wait till that 8-week appointment and get verification through ultrasound and through other physical examination to make sure that the pregnancy was healthy, and that everything looked okay up until that 8-week point before divulging information to family and getting everybody excited and whatnot. So we went to the appointment, which was really exciting. And it was so cool to see. I brought this out. This is something that since the miscarriage, we kind of have put away because we don't really know what to do with it. Honestly, that's another kind of question out there. What do you do with the evidence of the pregnancy? Since, for me, it was really early on that the pregnancy kind of was terminated. So anyhow, I'm pretty sentimental in general, and I still think that this is a really cool piece of my history. So this was the ultrasound that we got, and you can see this little nugget inside. And so that was really, really wild to see. Yeah. And you saw the heartbeat on the screen and you're like, that is wild. Because then it goes from, okay, it's not so simple to get pregnant, to how does something as simple as sex create this? Like, it's just kind of like a whirlwind of I don't know, wonder. Like, I felt like, wow, I'm in wonderment of this. So that was really neat. And in that visit, they kind of go over, well, this is how big the embryo is. This is what you can expect as far as potential symptoms. These are the foods you could avoid, the teas you could avoid, how much caffeine. They kind of go through the whole gamut with you of what's healthy to follow as you're entering into this pregnancy. How
much of that were you already familiar with?
I was pretty familiar with it myself because I specialize in the perinatal mental health arena. So when I talk to women about what's healthy for them and their bodies and their baby, I felt like it was important for me to be well-versed on that. So I'm pretty well-versed on it. But even though I'm well-versed on it, it almost all goes out the window when you're all of a sudden experiencing it. And you're like, no, but I really want that reassurance that what I say I know is accurate, right? So I still confirmed it all with my provider.
Yeah. Well, and what I was thinking of when I asked that was like, what if someone doesn't have that information and goes like 8 weeks without knowing it, and then goes in for that 8-week appointment, and maybe they've been like eating those things or drinking those things or whatever. I mean, I guess this is our world. This happens.
That happens all the time. I think it's less common for somebody to find out as early as I did. I had been tracking my cycle. I had been intentionally trying to get pregnant. So as soon as I missed my period, I had an indication, my period's pretty regular. So I pretty much know at this point that something else is going on there. And so I knew I was pregnant very early on. Many, many women have no clue that they're pregnant for weeks, for a couple months even. And the babies wind up being totally, totally fine. I mean, I have so many stories that I can go into, but I won't, because we'll get off on tangents of them, because some of them are wild, like women who have taken tests, who have gone for visits and still had no positive result of being pregnant, yet they were pregnant. And Yeah, of course.
Those stories scare the crap out of me.
Yeah, they can be scary, but I think it's also reassuring to know that so many babies are born and born healthy. You know, we have to live our lives. And that's not for me. That's not me saying while you're pregnant, actively do things that we know to be unhealthy for a baby. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if that should happen because you didn't know you were pregnant, try to be gentle with yourself, right? Like as soon as you know, then you can change some habits and do what you need to for your own body and for the health of the baby.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. And you're right. There are so many babies born to parents who maybe didn't know and were doing things unknowingly or whatever. And the baby is healthy. So, yeah. And again, like it comes back to like, the idea of controlling what we can control, but we can't control everything, but we can do things that reduce risk, not eliminate risk, that increase the likelihood that things are going to go well, but we can't guarantee that either. So yeah.
All true. All true. So we got the positive test. We saw that we had the baby inside of me. So it was there. We confirmed it. It was there. We saw it. And they told me at that visit that the baby was measuring about a week smaller than what my calendar said. And so I asked them if that was a problem. They said that shouldn't be any problem. So we went on our merry way. I felt really good. I didn't have many of the physical symptoms that people stereotypically associate with pregnancy. I was a little more hungry. I was definitely more tired, but I didn't have that intense nausea that a lot of people associate with pregnancy. But we'll see what happens next pregnancy. So, but I was feeling good. And because we had that confirmation that things were going well, we decided it was the week before Christmas or a week and a half before Christmas. And we had all these family gatherings coming up. So my husband and I had this grandiose plan of how we would kind of tell our closest family at our Christmas gatherings. We got up until the point of telling one of the sides of my family. And everybody, of course, very loving, very supportive, very excited. And it was on that day I was hosting people here. And for the past few days prior to that, I had some very light spotting. And so when I saw the spotting, it was kind of like brownish in color. I called the midwives. They said brown blood could be old blood. It could still be potentially old implantation bleeding, or it could just be normal, right? Like you can bleed during pregnancy as long as you don't see very red blood as if you're getting your period. That's what was indicated to me. They also said, if you should start to have more consistent cramping with this kind of spotting, that's also an indication that something could be not going well in there. So give us a call back. So the day that I was hosting family over, I was very tired. I was feeling fatigued. And I had this spotting for a couple days, light spotting. And then that day I did have some red bleeding. And when I saw that, it was very alarming. And so my heart goes out to any woman who sees that, because when you see red blood, it's usually an indication that something's not going right. It doesn't have to be. I do also know women who bleed a lot during their pregnancies and they're okay and the baby's okay. Again, I think this all goes to show that no one experience is the right experience or the experience that you can go off of as this is what should happen. Again, our expectations, right? So I called midwives again. They said it was light, so should be okay. That night or the night after, I started having really bad cramps and I can feel it. And I had this kind of instinctual, like, oh, this doesn't feel right. Like it feels like something's not right inside of myself. So in the morning when I woke up, I told my husband, I think it's probably best we go for an ultrasound today. I'd like to check things out. So we did. And the ultrasound tech was, they're not allowed to tell you, because I didn't go to my provider for the ultrasound. I went because it was on an off day. So I went to an ultrasound tech, I guess a radiology office, and they're not allowed to tell you the results because they have to send it to your provider. So that was obviously frustrating because all you want to know is, can I see this heartbeat? And at that point, I think I just said, I kind of intuitively knew that it wasn't viable anymore, the pregnancy, but still holding out hope, trying to remaining positive, not worrying until there's something to worry about. And I asked the tech to show me the screen so I can see, because I sort of know what to look for when it comes to a heartbeat. You could tell, like, it's a little flickering part on the screen. So I didn't see that. So I was like, okay, this is basically confirmation, but I'm still going to wait. So we went home and the report was sent directly to my provider. And also I can get the report through my patient portal for that particular office. So the report came in about an hour later. And that was one of the worst moments of this experience. The report says something along the lines of, no fetal cardiac activity detected, fetal demise likely to be the cause. And so the language, of course, is very cold. It's medical. Not that I was expecting it to be empathetic, but it is a harsh way to find out. Again, that was my doing. I was consistently looking for the report. I could have waited for my provider to call me. It probably would have been a more gentle way to find out.
Yeah, but who is able to do that? You know what
Right.
I mean? I think you did something very human and very understandable, which is you want this information as soon as possible. I mean, I think about people who get all kinds of medical tests. Am I going to wait for that empathetic voice of my doctor, which may or may not be empathetic depending on your doctor? I mean, it sounds like you've got a good team, but like, no, if you have access to your patient portal and the report comes in, you're going to read that.
Yes.
So the patient is going to, I think that we're going to see that language.
You're going to see that language. And it's something just to be aware of, that's the language that medicine is written in. I mean, it is to the point. It's not any emotion. It's not any fluff. This is what we observe. And this is what our recommendation or observation is telling us. I think it's probably really important to just have a little bit of an aside here. My husband was the first person to read the report. And when he came inside the room, I saw it on his face. And I'm not going to go into his experience too much because I want to, protect his privacy and his own feelings with regards to this topic. But I say that to say the partner in this, the non-pregnant partner in this situation, also is going through a lot during this experience, whether it's a healthy pregnancy or a not healthy pregnancy. They're almost sometimes I feel like it's even harder for them because they don't feel what's going on in the body. They're not the ones that can detect, oh, this cramp is fine. This cramp doesn't feel fine, right? They can't, they're just going off of the information that their partner is giving to them. And they're trying to be as supportive as they absolutely could. But it's also a very out of control experience for them. And so I think it's worth just putting a pin in that and maybe again coming back to that as a separate topic, how to support partners who are the non-pregnant party in this scenario, right? Because they're going through it too. They're going through it too, and they experience a loss, they experience the excitement, they experience the drop of excitement. So it's important it's important for them to support the person who's going through the physical experience, but also it's important for them to get support as well. So that was a pretty tough moment. That was a tough moment. I didn't particularly feel super connected to the pregnancy yet. I was excited for the pregnancy, but nothing really changed in my body. As I said before, I didn't have major symptoms. I mean, my breasts hurt quite a bit more. That was one of the symptoms that I did feel. But nothing appeared different anywhere else in my body. So it's hard because to conceptualize you're pregnant, you often think of the big pregnant belly. When you don't have that, or you don't have symptoms associated with pregnancy, it's kind of hard to picture yourself as a pregnant person. So I didn't necessarily feel super, super connected to the actual pregnancy. I felt, as soon as I knew I was pregnant, I felt this sense of, this is wonderful, because this was what I was hoping for. This is wonderful. I am going to take care of whatever, is going to come for me in the next 9 months. And I will do my best to take care of this new life inside of me. But I didn't necessarily feel a huge connection to it yet. And I don't know what that's like for other people. If they, again, there's an expectation. There's so many expectations around pregnancy. As soon as I'm pregnant, I'm going to feel like a mother. Maybe for some people, I didn't particularly feel that way, right? And I think I say that not to say one experience is correct or incorrect. It's just different. And neither of them is wrong. And so again, be gentle with yourself. It's okay to not feel that immediate connection, like, oh my God, this is my baby. And this is, this is my pregnant, it's different for everybody. And so if you hold too tightly to the expectations that you had, the storyline that you have in your mind, you're likely to be disappointed by something because it's not going to go the exact way you have the story in your mind. And this of course was not on my storyline. A miscarriage was not on my storyline, but I know how common they are. So I say that to say, to kind of normalize the experience. 1 in 4 known pregnancies end in a miscarriage. 1 in 4, that's a lot of pregnancies. That's a lot of pregnancies, and that's a lot of women going through loss. It is so remarkable to me how tight-lipped people are about this experience. And I don't think they mean to be again, I think you use the word secretive, and then you said it's not really that they're being secretive. You're right. It's not that they're trying to keep a secret. It's this, I don't know if it's a pressure from the external world that, well, something went wrong inside of me and it's something I'm ashamed of, or I'm going through grief and I don't know how to handle this. So I'm going to kind of turn inward and kind of isolate from the world because I feel really sad right now. All completely natural experiences to have. But what I found in my experience, I am a very verbal processor. Like I need to speak in order to process things through me. It's part of why I'm a therapist, because I understand how language can have such a strong and impactful significance on processing emotions. So for me, I immediately reached out to women in my life who I knew have babies, who I knew had experienced pregnancy. And when I did, I had such a surprising moment realizing so many of those women also had miscarriages, because it was something that I had not known about these people who are extremely close to me in my life. And it was something that for them, they took it in stride and kind of just, it happened. It was not pleasant. I was sad. I grieved, and now I moved on. And they did it by themselves a lot of the time, like not even telling their mothers. And it's not, and for people who are blessed to still have their mothers in their lives and be close with their mothers, they may feel like they don't want to share that. And again, that's up to you what you share with and who you share with. But it was shocking to me how many women in my life, aunts, cousins, some friends, and then their friends, right? So I would explain what happened to me, and one of my cousins said something along the lines of, yeah, I experienced that too. And I said, I had no idea, like, how was that for you? And we engaged in a conversation about it. And then they said, almost every one of my friends also did experience this. And I just couldn't believe how common it was. And I got to say, it made me feel better. It made me feel better to feel like there was this universality, this unspoken, because it was unspoken, but this unspoken understanding, like, I get what you're going through because this sucks, but so many women go through it. And this is kind of a common experience of pregnancy and family planning.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It's interesting that some of the people that you spoke to about this, like, you may never have learned about that had you not, for your own processing, chosen to like disclose and talk about it. And like, I just think it's what you said is so the piece that really jumps out to me is just like hearing from your loved ones, hey, that happened to me too, and or it also happened to tons of other people in my immediate circle who may not be in your immediate circle. What you said was that made you feel a lot better. And how many people don't get to have that experience of feeling more connected and feeling better because of that sort of sense of connection? Because it's so hard to talk about, or people have a hard time bringing it up or feeling like they can talk about it.
Yeah. And it is hard to talk about. And they're not easy conversations. It wasn't, a call that I was looking forward to making, but for me, reaching out to certain people for support in times that I feel like life is hard makes me feel better. And I'm really glad that I did, because then they shared their experiences and I didn't ask them if they felt better about sharing it. I was grateful to them for sharing. But I learned something new about people that I consider to know like mostly everything about, right? So it kind of opens the door for another connection and another conversation. One of the first thoughts that I had when I miscarried, and I think that many women go through this thought, or this thought passes their mind, because I've asked women what happens for them when they've miscarried, is, oh no, like shit, this means that I'm not going to be able to get pregnant. Like, this means I'm not going to be able to have a healthy pregnancy, and my plans of having a family need to be altered somehow, right? And so I had an almost immediate like, oh, what does this mean for my future? But not like, what does this mean for my future in a positive way? It was, this means something not good for my future. So knowing that women who I care about and, trust had gone through this and have gone on to have healthy babies after that was extremely reassuring. And again, that's their experience. That doesn't mean that's going to be my experience, but it was reassuring because my first instinct was to be like, oh no, this is a sign of a bigger problem, right? Because it is such a blow. It really is such a blow. Whether or not you feel connected to it, whether or not you wanted the pregnancy, going through a miscarriage is hard. It is a physically taxing experience. So just knowing that it doesn't necessarily mean there's an underlying problem. It's just, it could just be isolated to this experience, to this one pregnancy. And more often than not, the statistics show that that's the case.
Yeah. So Maria, do you think you would feel like it's within the scope of this conversation, this podcast, to talk a little bit about physically what happened? Because I think that is a piece that not only do people not necessarily talk about the fact that this has happened to them at all, but then even if they do, they may talk about it as, I had a miscarriage, period, and here's how I felt. But I think that what I don't hear people talk about a lot is actually what does that physically entail? Like, what happens to the body when that is happening? And I feel like that could potentially be a hard thing for people to hear about, but also could be like very educational for people to learn from. Not that your experience is going to be identical to other people's experience necessarily, but does that feel like something that you see as within the scope of this conversation?
Absolutely, because I think that that's a pretty educational piece. And that doesn't mean I know everything about the options that are available to women when they are going through a miscarriage, but I can explain at least what my experience was and the information that I was given, and know that being a strong advocate for yourself to ask those questions to your provider is more than half the battle. If you can at least get to the point where you say, I know this is hard for me to talk about, but what if this should happen for me? Your provider will give you all the options. And yes, trusting your provider is an important piece of it. So shop around, make sure you feel good with the person that you're going to be spending a lot of the next 9 months talking to about this pregnancy. So for me, the options were 3 options.
Can you back up? So you got that ultrasound, you got the paperwork, you saw it in your portal.
Yes.
And then, so is the option, so from that point to finding out these options, you went in to meet with someone in person?
So I actually, there's like, I guess a small piece in between that. So from that moment to going in to see my provider, I actually called one of my good friends who is an OB/GYN. And I, there's a lot of this, like, well, what if the ultrasound was wrong, right? Like you start, what are the chances? And Google, how much percentage what are the percentages of ultrasounds being incorrect? Like, and So I was going through that process in the immediacy of finding out that it was likely not a viable pregnancy anymore. So I called her and I said, listen, this is what happened. Could you just check me out for a second ultrasound opinion? Because again, she's somebody who I really, really trust as a personal friend in my life. And I'm so grateful to have her in my life and grateful that she was open to doing that for me. So she gave me the confirmation I needed to move on to what these 3 possible options are. So the 3 options that my provider, because I went in to see my provider at that point, and they gave me 3 options. The first is letting it pass naturally, which may or may not happen. I had physical signs of miscarrying already, cramping, bleeding. We knew there was a miscarriage because there was no fetal heartbeat. But even without the ultrasound, we had some significant signs that things were ended at that point as far as the pregnancy was concerned. Some people don't have any signs, and that I believe is called a missed abortion, where your body is not actually recognizing yet that the fetus is no longer viable. And so you don't have any physical signs of the pregnancy not being viable. And sometimes that happens for women, and they go in for a scheduled ultrasound. And in that ultrasound, they find out that the pregnancy is no longer there. The fetus is still there, but not necessarily the heartbeat or any activity there. And that, I'm sure, is a heart-wrenching experience in and of itself, to have absolutely no signs and then be kind of bombarded with that information. I'm sure is really difficult. So the first option is allowing it to pass naturally, which could happen and does happen for a lot of women. A lot of women have a miscarriage and never even go to the doctor. They just call up and say, like, I think this is what happened. This is what passed. And when I say passed, I mean, fetal material passing. And then that's kind of the end of it. And then you go in and get checked after a couple of weeks to make sure all the material is no longer in your uterus, because what they would not want is any sign of any material from the past pregnancy, because that could lead to infection. So if everything is not out, that is a problem, and they'll have to go and use other interventions to remove it. So that's the first option. That option could take up to weeks after the miscarriage. Your body can take a long time to expel what is in your uterus. The second option that was presented to me was taking a certain medication that essentially induces the abortion, the physical abortion of the fetus. I believe it is also considered, quote unquote, the abortion pill. So some women choose to use this even when a pregnancy is viable, because that's their choice about that pregnancy. And they say that the medicine usually, once taking it, you will have lost whatever is within, your uterus within 2 days from taking the medicine. Still also need to go check to make sure after the fact that everything's gone, because it's not 100% certain that everything will be removed naturally after the medication. And then the third option is called a D&C. And that is a medical procedure where a woman is kind of put under some anesthetic. So they're not really aware of what's going on. So there's no pain felt during this procedure. And the provider will go in and essentially manually remove whatever is in your uterus, so that it is gone, it is empty, and your body can go back to its natural state prior to the pregnancy. So the option that I chose would be the second option, where I took medicine to kind of induce the process to make it go a little bit quicker. And I chose that option for 2 reasons. The first being that it was really close to Christmas, and I didn't want any spontaneous experiences happening around my family. And I still wanted to be able to go to my celebratory Christmas parties and all of that. Because I was determined to enjoy Christmas regardless of this happening. Not to forget about it, but just, to hold opposites at the same time. This is really sad, but I'm also enjoying Christmas, right? So that was one reason. And the second reason being that I was really looking forward to being able to try again to get pregnant again. And so I felt that the sooner the pregnancy, that pregnancy was completed, the sooner my body can heal and my mind could heal, and I can get back to a place where my partner and I were ready to begin trying again for another pregnancy. So I used that medication, and I will say that I think my experience, according to my providers, was something of an outlier experience. So I don't express this to scare anybody or to change anybody's course of action. But I wish that I was given this information, what I'm about to say. The experience of pain from this medicine was excruciating. It was not just worse than my bad period. It was really, really horrible. I am blessed enough to have my mom here, and she stayed over when I was taking medication. So I had the support of my husband and my mom. And my mom has had 3 children, so she knows what labor looks like. And so when I was at the height of the medicine working, she said, Maria, you look like you're at the end of labor right now. Like, this is what I would, picture labor to look like. So I guess I wish that I was told it likely won't be this bad, but it could be as bad as labor pains. I just wish I had that anticipatory knowledge, because maybe I would have prepared with another pain management technique that would have been helpful, right? That would have been very helpful. I did not expect that, so I didn't prepare. I think I took Tylenol, which was really not that helpful in that moment. So what was helpful was taking a bath during that moment. The release of pressure on my body was very, very helpful to alleviate some of the pain. So what concerned me during this period was that the pain level went so high and my bleeding stopped. So I was expecting pain and bleeding to go together. So I thought something was wrong. So the next day, before taking a second dose of the medication, I went into my provider to check, and it, lo and behold, had passed. So the fetus did pass because of this medicine, and I was so grateful and relieved, because it meant that I didn't need to go through any other interventions, whether it be taking that medication or going through the procedure, the DNC procedure. So from there, I had a pretty, what I would consider like what a heavy period would be like, for about a week, and cramping and some release of other fetal products or pregnancy products that they call it I think they call it products of conception, products of conception within my uterus. Yeah. And that was all, released from my body, and I felt pretty good, pretty quickly after. It was early on in the pregnancy that it was terminated, and which helps, because again, my body didn't have any changes at that point, but internally a lot was going on. Right. So, it's still, one of the sad things for me was to kind of have the loss of any of the pregnancy symptoms I did have. Like, I actually missed the fact that my breasts were hurting, or a little bit more, I guess, swollen, because that showed that I was pregnant. I missed having little like hunger cravings, because I was like, oh, that's another sign of, because you have all these indications that you're pregnant other than a positive pregnancy test. And so you start to lose those things too. And I think the hardest thing for me was the loss of all of the excitement that I was looking forward to. Yeah, that's the hardest part of the grief in my journey. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the hardest part for other people, but if we're talking about my experience, it was a very hard thing to be like, wow, we just told half of our family and have these beautiful, beautiful videos to commemorate the memory, and now I feel like I don't really want to watch those videos. Do I even keep them? I have an example here of something, all the grandparents got like a little Christmas ornament that it was how we revealed to our grandparents that we were expecting a baby. And so all of these things that you plan for that are no longer in the same timeline. Again, it's no longer the storyline I had in my head. So readjusting and coming back to a state of neutral or balance, or, okay, well, this happened. I couldn't control it. It was nothing I did wrong. There was nothing I could have done to prevent this. And really, really, truly accepting that, and accepting what I think a lot of women hear. So it could be something that women don't want to hear because they're kind of tired of it. But I do hold pretty fast to this belief that I trust my body to have known that something wasn't right with the pregnancy. And it kind of made a decision for me that maybe I would have been faced with later on in the pregnancy. And that would have been really difficult experience for me to have been faced with. A decision of, if this baby isn't a healthy baby, what do you do with it? I mean, that in and of itself is a whole emotional roller coaster to go on. So all that to say that you come back to a state of balance and decide, well, what am I going to do now? I know my body could get pregnant. How quickly do I want to try? And that's up to the couple. That's up to you and your partner to decide what you want to do next. I think you're opening up a conversation that we can start like a part 2 episode to this one with, which is like, okay, this is what you've been through. This is what it was like. How has this experience shaped your thinking and your feeling as you move forward? Like, what are the next steps as you go into trying again? Is this experience shaping what that feels like, how you're approaching that? Yeah, I think that there's more of this conversation to be had than we can fit in this one episode. I agree. And
Did I cut you off when you were in the middle of anything that you were wanting to share? Sorry, I think I jumped on the end of your last sentence.
No, not at all. I agree, though, that kind of continuing this conversation would be helpful for any viewers, because they might be wondering, well, what would that even look like? What does it look like for somebody? And I'm willing to share what that looked like for me. Again, that's my experience. And I'll say that a lot because that's really important for people to know, that just because it's my experience does not mean it's theirs. But what can be a universal experience is sharing, right? We can universally feel comfortable, or even if we don't feel comfortable, we can universally find people that, even if it doesn't feel comfortable, to share with, because that tends to make difficult life experiences a little bit more, manageable.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it reminds me of, are you familiar with Kristen Neff?
No.
She's I think she's a psychologist who's done a bunch of research on self-compassion. She's got a great TED Talk about self-compassion and what the difference is between self-compassion and self-esteem. And it's a little off topic, but the piece of that research that I think is relevant to what you're saying is the idea that when we, in community with other people, find our sort of shared humanity, that is like a powerful source of healing and connection, and it can be very alleviating of like shame and isolation and things like that. That idea of common humanity, she talks about it in her research as like a component of self-compassion. Like, it might be helpful to the other person to share, but it's helpful to you to sort of settle yourself within yourself when you access that shared humanity thing. Makes sense? Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And I love a good TED Talk, so I'm definitely gonna
give it a call after this, or I'll send you the link. It's probably like 20 minutes long. It's really good.
Awesome. I'll definitely take a listen. Well, thank you for listening. I always appreciate your time.
Yeah, my pleasure. I love talking to you.
So,
and thanks for trusting me with something hard.
Yeah.
You've done a lot of processing and are coming into this conversation from a place of feeling like this is not as raw as it was when it was first happening, but I still, appreciate your sharing about it. And I still feel a sense of like trust between us in this conversation. And I just love and appreciate you.
The feeling is very mutual. So, all right. Well, that's it for today. And we'll be back, I guess, with part 2 of this, of what does it look like in the aftermath of a miscarriage for people who are either deciding not to try again or deciding to try again.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds good. So thanks to everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.